Being president is the epitome of power.
In no other country on earth is my story even possible.
Every word remembered.
It's time for us to change America.
Every word scrutinized.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. Period.
But behind every commander-in-chief is a team of insiders, crafting every move, every message a president makes. When Barack Obama was elected in 2008, his backroom brains were considered political innovators.
The best political campaign, I think, in the history of the United States of America.
Pioneering a new way of campaigning.
To my chief strategist, David Axelrod, who's been a partner with me every step of the way. You made this happen.
David Axelrod was in charge of communication strategy for Obama's 2 presidential campaigns.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can.
The brains behind that slogan that inspired millions and the logo that raised millions. He also spent 2 years in the White House as senior advisor to the president, with an office right next door to the most powerful person in the world. Now he's written about it all in his new memoir, Believer, My 40 Years in Politics.
Good to be with you.
We met up earlier today in Toronto.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be on a book tour instead of a campaign tour?
The book tour has given me a little bit of a feel for what it's like to be a candidate, and I emailed the president. I said, I apologize for all those times I was indifferent when you complained about the events we were adding to your schedule, because it's been really aggressive.
Yeah, you pushed him really hard, right? He complained a couple of times.
We did push him hard, but he did everything that needed to be done. And running for president of the United States is an incredible test and burden, and it should be. You're running for the hardest job on the planet, but it's almost inhuman what you have to do to get elected president of the United States.
What is it that's different about them? I mean, are they not normal?
Politicians?
Yeah.
You know, I think as a class they are not normal. One of the things that I said to Barack Obama when he was thinking about running for president was that I was worried that he wasn't pathological enough to run for president, because I knew a lot of the other candidates and I knew they had to be president of the United States. They would drag themselves out of bed at 4 in the morning and they'd go for 20 hours because they had to be president. And I said, I don't sense that in you. And he said, no, he said, turns out that being Barack Obama in and of itself is a pretty good gig, and I like being with my family and I like being with my friends, and I don't feel this need to be president. He said, but if you're doing public service, do it at the highest level where you can have the biggest impact. And he said, if I run, I'm competitive enough, and he is competitive, that I will find the impetus to do what needs to be done, and he did.
You got the bug when you were 5?
5, yes.
You were watching JFK.
Embarrassing. I mean, I liked baseball and other things too, so I don't want people to think I was a complete nerd.
But it was JFK.
It was John F. Kennedy. He came to the housing development where I grew up when I was a child. It was built for returning war veterans in New York City and Manhattan. And a woman who took care of me when my mother was at work, this African-American woman named Jessie Berry, heard that he was coming, and she said, we ought to see this, and she took me out and put me on top of a mailbox, and I watched as this big boulevard filled in with people. JFK jumped up on this platform, and everybody was riveted on him, and he was talking about stuff that I knew was important. I didn't quite understand why, but it just all felt very important and exciting and energizing, and that was it. I sort of got the bug that day. And I often think about that woman, Jessie Berry, who took me there, because she was a poor black woman from the South. And I think she would have been excited to know that I ended up working for the first African-American president of the United States.
You write about how by the time you got to the White House, you'd become a little disillusioned about politics, that it had become not about Obama, obviously, but about politics as business. And you write that the lobbyists who fund the campaigns wield way too much influence, that most members of Congress are more interested in scoring points than they are solving problems for future generations. How bad is it? How much is about politics and not about the idealism that you started out with when you got the bug at age 5?
Well, Wendy, I think that the world of politics, as I find it everywhere, kind of divides into two categories. The people who run for office because they want to do something. It's a smaller, more admirable group. And then the rest of politicians who run for office because they want to be something. And for that second group, getting elected is the most important thing. For the first group, accomplishing something once you're there is the most important thing. That's why I was so attracted to Obama, because from the first time I met him, it was clear to me that that he viewed public service as a calling, not as a business, and an opportunity to make the biggest difference you can make.
The people that you say are so driven to get up at 4 in the morning, that could include Hillary Clinton, maybe, or a
Well, she's the hardest working person that I've ever seen. I mean, when we ran against her, we would get to sometimes we'd be in small towns and we'd be in the same place. So her campaign and our campaign would arrive at the same hotel. We'd get there at midnight, you know, and she'd get there at 1, and we'd leave at 9, and she'll have left at 7. And
so she's superhuman or super driven?
Well, I think she's strong and she's very driven. There's no doubt she's very driven. And, you know, it is an arduous pursuit.
So you were the holder of secrets, a lot of
Yes.
secrets
Yeah.
for many years. How did you decide what you could write and what you should maybe leave out?
No, it was difficult. And partly what I didn't want to do was write a kind of compendium of sort of perishable gossip items that would titillate the media for the first few days.
You can dispense a couple now that
No,
you're left out.
I'm sticking to my rule because I wanted to write something larger about what we were just talking about the fact that this is worthy work. And, you know, I wanted the subtitle of my book to be How My Idealism Survived 40 Years in Politics. I wanted to write something that would leave people inspired to think, yeah, maybe this is worthwhile.
So did you run it by him ahead of time? I'm just wondering, there was a rather famous memoir written by a guy who ran Stephen Harper's campaigns, and they no longer speak since the book came out.
No, you know, I didn't want to put him in a position to have editorial control, so I waited until the book was printed and bound before I sent him a copy, and I sent him a copy. And he was very generous in his reaction to it. He was a little unhappy about a few things, thought I had him cursing too much. There were a couple of other items, and one of which was very valid, which was I wrote about his very difficult first debate against Mitt Romney, and he said, you didn't put in there that you guys told me not to engage with him too much. I must tell you that when I got a call, you know, when you get a call from the president, it's always the White House operator saying, you know, President is on the line, do you have a minute for him?
Maybe.
And it's just like, I asked him once, does anybody ever say no? He said, only John Boehner, right, the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House. But when he called, I kind of drew a deep breath because I had sent him the book. I knew he probably had read it. And he started off and he said, well, I've read your book. And then there's this long pause. And I thought, hey, I wonder what's going to come next. And he said, and I like it. I think you've done a great job. He said, but there are a few things I want to mention to you. So on the whole, he's been very supportive.
There's a lot of great anecdotes. One of the ones that's been picked up, obviously, is you were the guy who came up with Yes, We Can, but apparently it wasn't that easy.
No, Yes, We Can almost was No, We're Not. This was a slogan that I wrote for his first Senate campaign. And the first ad we did was an ad in which he talked about all the barriers that he had overcome in his life, legislative fights he had won. And it concluded by saying, now they say we can't change Washington. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message to say, yes, we can. And I loved Yes, We Can because it was optimistic. It talked about we and not him. And he got through the first reading and he said, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Is that too corny? And he turned to Michelle, who was sitting on the steps of this house where we were shooting, watching him shoot his first ad. And he said to her, Mish, what do you think? And she said, not corny. Thank God she was there because it may have died right there, but it ended up being
Kind of
something
took
that
off.
it did take off.
The other story that I loved was the one about Osama Bin Laden and that night. Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, you know, I was gone from the White House by the time the Bin Laden mission happened. And I came back to visit because the president was speaking at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I was going to, and I was helping on jokes for that was part of my thing, was to contribute jokes for his speech because it's a humorous speech. And I went back, we had lunch. It was a Saturday afternoon, and it was a very normal conversation. A person from the National Security Council came in and asked, and he said, "Can you leave? I just have to talk to this guy for a second." Came back in. Then we were preparing for the routine, and we go through the jokes, and there's one about Osama Bin Laden. And he said, "Oh, Bin Laden, Bin Laden." He said, "That's so yesterday. Why don't we take that out?" And we were like, "No, it's a good joke, but, you know," so we take it out. And I think nothing of it. He goes and he kills that night. He's just great. I went to bed early. I'd done a morning show in Washington, and my wife woke me up and said, "You better get up because I think they just killed Osama Bin Laden." So and I realized as I watched this that he knew at the time that we had been together that he had authorized that mission. And the fact that he was so calm is something I'll always remember. That's the thing about Obama, is he's very deliberative in making decisions, but once he makes them, he's not a guy who kind of wrings his hands, or, you know, his feeling is you make the best decision you can and then you live with it.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have
Great
fun
to
on your
be
book
here.
tour.
I appreciate it.
Enjoy life after politics.
Thank you.